All right, so we are going to dive into some fascinating data about the Canadian job market. We've got this CTV News article, and honestly, the numbers are kind of throwing me for a loop.
Oh, good economic puzzle. This is where things get really interesting.
Exactly. So, Headline News Canada added a whopping 50,500 jobs in November. At first glance, you think, wow, economy's booming.
Yeah, it certainly seems like
Yeah,
a positive indicator at first glance. Creating jobs generally, a sign of healthy economy.
right. But here's the thing. The unemployment rate actually went up to 6.8%, the highest it's been since January 2017, not counting the whole pandemic roller coaster. Help me out here. How can we be adding jobs but also see unemployment rising? Something doesn't quite add up.
Yeah, you've hit on a key point. We need to look beyond just the surface level numbers
Yeah.
and dig a little deeper. The rise in unemployment isn't because people are losing their jobs. It's because more people are actively entering the workforce, looking for jobs. The number of new job seekers is outpacing the number of available positions, which pushes that unemployment rate high.
Okay, so it's not that jobs are disappearing. It's more like the pool of people looking for work.
Is expanding faster than the job market can keep up with.
Precisely. To really grasp this, it's helpful to understand the concept of the labor force participation rate. Is the percentage of the population that's either employed or actively seeking employment. When more people enter the workforce, that participation rate goes up, and it can influence the unemployment rate, even if jobs are being created.
That makes sense. It's like a game of musical chairs, where suddenly more players join in, but there aren't enough chairs for everyone. And the article highlights that youth unemployment, those aged 15 to 24, are facing a particularly tough time, with a rate of 13.9%. I can't help but think of friends and family starting their careers. It must feel pretty discouraging to be entering the workforce during a time like this.
Absolutely. Youth unemployment is often a leading indicator of broader trends in the job market. It's a critical time for young people as they try to gain experience and build their careers, and it raises questions about whether the skills being taught align with the jobs being created. Yeah. It's a good reminder that the job market isn't just about numbers. It's about people's lives and livelihoods. Now, there's another piece of this puzzle that has me scratching my head. While all this is happening, job growth, rising unemployment, wage growth for permanent employees actually slowed down to 3.9%. That's the lowest since June 2023. If there's more competition for jobs, wouldn't you expect wages to be going up? Basic supply and demand.
In theory, yes. A tighter labor market usually leads to higher wages as employers compete for talent. But we might be seeing a few things at play here. It could be that employers are feeling the pinch of rising interest rates and general economic uncertainty, so they're hesitant to commit to higher wages, even if they need workers. Or perhaps the types of jobs being created are shifting towards sectors with typically lower wage growth. It's a complex picture with multiple factors intertwining.
So there's a disconnect between what we'd expect in a textbook scenario and what's actually happening on the ground.
Exactly. And this is where economic analysis gets fascinating. We need to consider not just the immediate data points, but also the broader context and underlying trends shaping the labor market.
Speaking of broader context, the article mentions that this whole situation, job growth, rising unemployment, slowing wage growth, has stark speculation about some major moves from the Bank of Canada. They're talking about potential interest rate cuts, and not just a little tweak, a significant cut, maybe even as much as 50 basis points. Can you explain what that actually means and why it's causing such a stir?
Of course. First, let's clarify what basis points means. It's a term you'll hear a lot in financial discussions. A basis point is 1/100th of a percentage point. So a 50 basis point cut means a reduction of 0.5%. Now, why is this significant? The Bank of Canada sets interest rates to try to manage inflation and keep the economy stable. Cutting rates makes it cheaper for businesses to borrow money, which can encourage investment and spending, potentially stimulating economic growth. But it can also increase inflation if done too aggressively.
So it's like they're trying to walk a tightrope between boosting the economy and keeping inflation in check.
Precisely. And the fact that markets are predicting such a significant cut suggests there are growing concerns about a potential economic slowdown.
Okay, so we've laid out the pieces of this economic puzzle. We have job growth, rising unemployment, slowing wage growth, and now speculation about major interest rate cuts. It's enough to make anyone's head spin. But what does it all mean? What's the takeaway for someone trying to make sense of this complex picture?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? And to answer it, we need to dive a bit deeper into the historical trends of Canada's job market and explore the potential ripple effects of these predicted interest rate cuts.
Right, lead the way. Help us connect the dots and figure out what's really going on with Canada's job market.
Well, first, it's crucial to remember that economic indicators like the job market are rarely static. They're constantly in flux, responding to a myriad of internal and external forces. What we're seeing in Canada currently is a bit of a mixed bag, a blend of positive and concerning signals that require careful analysis.
So it's not all doom and gloom,
Mhm.
but it's not exactly smooth sailing either.
Exactly. Let's start with the positives. The fact that we're seeing job growth at all is encouraging. It indicates there's still underlying strength in the economy, that businesses are expanding and creating opportunities. But the rising unemployment rate alongside this growth suggests a different story, that the pace of job creation isn't quite robust enough to absorb all the new entrants into the workforce.
Like we're moving forward, but there's a bit of a drag holding us back.
A good analogy. Now, the slowdown in wage growth is particularly perplexing at first glance. In a classic supply and demand scenario, when competition for workers increases, you'd anticipate wages to rise accordingly.
Right, it's like a bidding war for talent. The more companies need workers, the more they should be willing to pay to attract them. So what's causing this wage growth to sputter?
It's likely a combination of factors. One possibility is a lag effect. Employers might be feeling the pressure of those rising interest rates we discussed earlier and the general economic uncertainty, so they're hesitant to commit to higher wages, even if they have open positions. Think of it as a cautious approach, a wait-and-see attitude, before making significant salary adjustments.
Makes sense. Businesses want to make sure they're on solid ground before increasing their costs. But for workers struggling with the rising cost of living, that wage stagnation can feel pretty frustrating.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to the potential impact of those anticipated interest rate cuts. If the Bank of Canada does decide to lower rates, it could potentially stimulate the economy by making it cheaper for businesses to borrow money and invest. This, in turn, could create a more favorable environment for wage growth down the line.
So a rate cut could be a good thing for both businesses and workers. A win-win situation.
Potentially, yes. But as with any economic policy decision, there are potential downsides to consider. Lower interest rates can also fuel inflation, if not managed carefully. It's a balancing act for the central bank. They're trying to find that sweet spot where they can stimulate economic activity without letting inflation run rampant. And let's not forget the external forces at play.
You mean the things outside of Canada's control?
Yeah.
Like the global economy?
Precisely. We're in a world where economies are interconnected. Events on the other side of the globe can have a ripple effect here in Canada. Geopolitical instability, supply chain disruptions, the lingering effects of the pandemic. All these factors can influence Canada's economic performance, regardless of what the Bank of Canada does with interest rates.
So even if the Bank of Canada gets it just right with interest rates or all these other wild cards,
Yeah.
that could throw things off course.
Exactly. That's why making economic predictions is often compared to forecasting the weather. There are so many variables at play that it's impossible to be 100% certain of the outcome. We can analyze the trends, weigh the probabilities, but ultimately there's always an element of unpredictability.
Kind of like life itself.
Right.
You can plan and prepare, but there are always surprises along the way. But I think a lot of our listeners are wondering, how does all this economic jargon actually affect me? What should they be paying attention to? And how can they use this information to make smart decisions in their own lives?
That's the key question. All this economic data is interesting in its own right, but it's most valuable when we can connect it to our personal lives and financial choices. Let's consider a few practical examples.
All right, let's get down to brass tacks. How might these economic trends influence the average person in Canada?
Well, let's say you're thinking about buying a house. The potential for interest rate cuts might make you want to hold off for a bit and see if mortgage rates drop. This could save you thousands of dollars over the life of your loan. On the flip side, if you're already in a secure job, feeling confident about your financial situation, and have been waiting for the right time to invest, now might be an opportunity. Prices for certain assets might be lower than they will be once the economy starts to pick up again.
So it's about being strategic,
Mm-hmm.
understanding the potential risks and opportunities, and making informed choices based on your individual circumstances.
Precisely. And if you're currently in the job market, it's even more important to showcase your unique skills and experience. Yes, the unemployment rate is up, but companies are still actively hiring. They're just being more selective, more discerning in their search for the right talents.
So it's not enough to just send out a generic resume and hope for the best.
Not in this environment. You need to craft your resume and cover letter to highlight the specific skills and experience that align with the jobs you're targeting. Network like crazy. Attend industry events. Connect with people on LinkedIn. Reach out to people you admire for informational interviews. Building relationships and making those personal connections can give you a significant edge in a competitive job market.
So the takeaway here is that Canada's job market is a dynamic landscape, a blend of opportunity and uncertainty. To navigate it successfully, you need to stay informed, be adaptable, and proactively seek out those opportunities.
Absolutely. And that's why deep dives like this are so valuable. They equip us with the knowledge and insights we need to make informed decisions,
Yeah.
both personally and professionally.
Well said. Okay, before we wrap up, I have to ask, we've talked about the immediate impacts of these economic trends, but what about the longer-term implications? What should we be watching for in the coming months and years as this all plays out?
That's a great question, and one that economists and policymakers are grappling with constantly. There are a few key factors, I believe, will be particularly influential, not just for Canada, but on a global scale. One is the ongoing evolution of artificial intelligence and automation. It's a topic that sparks both excitement and apprehension.
Yeah, it's hard to escape the headlines about AI these days.
Yeah.
It seems like every week there's a new breakthrough or a new concern about the potential impact on jobs. I have to admit, I'm both fascinated and a little bit intimidated by the whole thing.
It's understandable. AI and automation are already transforming industries from manufacturing to healthcare to finance, and that pace of change is only going to accelerate. The question is, how will this impact the types of jobs being created and the skills that are in demand? Will AI be a force for job displacement, or will it create new opportunities we can't even imagine yet?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Are we all going to be replaced by robots, or will AI free us up to do more creative and fulfilling work?
It's likely a blend of both. Some jobs will inevitably be automated, particularly those involving repetitive tasks or data analysis. But this also opens up opportunities for new roles that require uniquely human skills, things machines can't easily replicate. Think about creativity, critical thinking, complex problem-solving emotional intelligence, the ability to connect with others on a human level. These skills will become even more valuable in the age of AI.
So it's not necessarily about competing with robots, but rather about finding ways to complement them and leverage their capabilities.
Precisely. It's about adapting our skills and mindsets to thrive in a world where humans and machines work side by side. And this brings us to another significant trend. We need to keep an eye on the rise of the gig economy and remote work. It's a shift that's been building for years, but the pandemic certainly accelerated it.
Yeah, I know so many people who are now freelancing or working remotely, either by choice or necessity. It seems like the traditional 9-to-5 office job is becoming less and less the norm. But is this a good thing for workers, or does it create new challenges?
It's a complex issue with both pros and cons. On the one hand, the gig economy offers flexibility and autonomy that many people find appealing. You can set your own hours, be your own boss, work from anywhere with an internet connection. It can be incredibly empowering. But there's a flip side to this freedom.
I imagine it can also be pretty isolating and unpredictable, right? No guaranteed paycheck, no company-provided benefits, maybe even a bit lonely, working from home all the time.
Those are valid concerns. The gig economy often lacks the stability and security of traditional employment. And as remote work becomes more prevalent, it raises questions about work-life balance, social isolation, and the future of office culture. It's a whole new world of work that we're still figuring out as we go.
So it seems like Canada's job market, much like the global economy, is at a crossroads facing a convergence of powerful forces. We have technological advancements, reshaping industries, evolving ways of working, and ongoing economic uncertainty. It's a lot to take in.
It certainly is. But amidst all this change and complexity, there are also opportunities for those who are willing to adapt, learn, and embrace new ways of thinking about work.
So what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to leave with today? What's the most important thing they can do to navigate this evolving world of work successfully?
I'd say the key is to be proactive. Don't wait for the future to happen to you. Embrace lifelong learning, cultivate those uniquely human skills we discussed, and be open to new possibilities. Network experiment, take calculated risks, and never stop learning. The job market may be unpredictable, but it's also full of opportunities for those who are willing to evolve and adapt.
Well said. And on that note of proactive adaptation, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Canada's job market puzzle. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the latest economic data to the potential impact of AI and the changing nature of work itself. Hopefully you're feeling a little more informed and maybe even a little more inspired to navigate the ever-evolving world of work. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking those big questions.